Colm Tóibín, you've been spending this week in Heidelberg as you're participating in the DAI project with the question Science as Religion. For this you're doing an internship in various science institutions to find out how strongly nowadays the natural sciences take over the traditional role of religion as far as meaningfulness or orientation or creating values is concerned. You will finally write a literary text on your findings and thoughts. My question is, what made you curious to take part in this project?
I suppose we're all serious people, so that the idea that science replaces religion isn't really an issue, because religion itself has become so easily disputed. And so what I was interested in finding here was not another area of certainty that would replace religion with another form of certainty, but almost a parallel form of uncertainty. So I was interested in how much we don't know. In a way, if religion now is agnosticism, or at least atheism moving towards agnosticism, then science too has its agnostics. That it's very difficult in science for anyone serious to be certain, especially in the light of what we know about physics, or astrophysics, or cosmology, or astronomy. So I was interested in in a way, what I was interested in was finding out what the tone of that uncertainty is. In the same way, if I were with a group of theologians, I would want to know what language they were using, what phrases they were using, as much as what they actually believed or didn't believe. So because I live in language, therefore what I was interested in was listening and taking notes, not on mathematical equations, which don't interest me, but in actual the sentence to describe a certain thing that somebody will use. And one of the strange things that's happened here in Germany is that all of this discipline is conducted through English.
Yes.
So you've abandoned the German language. I mean, the great language of Spinoza, of Immanuel Kant, of you know, of all your philosophers that really were filled with concepts, both abstract and concrete, for the poor business of English, which hasn't got the same richness of philosophical content. But this thinness may be helpful, in fact, in helping uncertainty to seem even more uncertain. And so I was interested in listening to what this sounded like.
Okay. When you talk about uncertainty, does this also mean that you're scrutinizing paradigms of thinking or of looking at the world?
Yes. Scrutinizing is a good word, but I'm not particularly good at scrutinizing as much as looking carefully. Well, yes, scrutinizing. Actually, let's hold scrutinizing. Yes, I mean, I'm as interested sometimes in watching the person as I am in listening, and trying to find a connection between, say, a personality and a way of speaking. But not just that, but that this business of remaining uncertain, of not knowing, has to come with is a form of skepticism. And skepticism, no matter what you do with it, and it occurs also in philosophy, is a form of good humor. So that what you're watching is the way in which somebody will have a sort of good humored way of presenting someone like me with information, which itself is good humored. By good humored I mean it's open to suggestion. It's never certain. It's not sure what completion would be.
As we were just talking about language, and with English being the new lingua franca in sciences, do you think this good-humoredness could help getting the former richness of German philosophical concepts into this new lingua franca?
No. You know, there's something so strange now about heritage in Germany, and about also about the way in which this half century has been the American half century.
Yeah.
And so the English language has become, in so many areas, the dominant language. So that it is really a question of trying to connect to the outside world. I mean, you know, all you have to do is try thinking like a scientist. Imagine if German had remained the language.
Yes.
What the difference would be, because it would have to involve a certain area of provinciality. You know, that in other words, if you come from Latvia, and I've met students from Latvia, or from Italy, you have to learn German, whereas so many students have already learning, that English is already the language they're learning. So I think it would be unimaginable, really, if German had remained the language, and I think it would be damaging for science. But nonetheless, it's very interesting that...
would give you a fragmented view, presumably.
Yes. And we have to remember, you know, that we can be very... simple-minded about what the German heritage is. We can think about it, it's dark, it's heavy, it's authoritarian, but it is also the language of Schiller.
Yes.
You know, it's also the language of Schubert's songs.
Yes.
You know, it's also the language of the magic flute. You know, it's also
Kant,
and it's also the language of Einstein.
Yeah.
You know, and it's also the language of Thomas Mann's Felix Krull. That you know that there is a light lyrical side to it. So we just be careful that we're not using cliches to describe something that really requires a great deal of care.
Coming to the topics you were dealing with. You especially talked to scientists in the field of cosmology and quantum dynamics. Why do you think that exactly these disciplines could help you find an approach to that question in this project?
Look, it's absolutely essential, if you're writing fiction, that you can position your character or your people in society in some larger context. Now, it doesn't mean you have to mention this context and constantly talk about, you know, dark energy, dark matter, Big Bang, you know, the microwave background. Like it doesn't mean you have to mention these things, but you have to have some concept of where society is positioned. Certainly for the novels I write, you do. And so that if you, it's very, very difficult to set a novel among Christians, among believing Christians, because everything they believe then is ordered, sorted out. God intervenes, especially with Catholics.
Is it?
Well. I mean, among Catholics.
Even now it is? Okay.
I mean, among I'm talking about a way of imagining Catholics, which would be flawed, which would be wrong. You know, it wouldn't work in a novel. Because it would be, I think, a failure of imagination to imagine we sometimes believe something and then we forget we believe it. Society works in a different way. People act in a different way than they believe. And so you're always working with those ambiguities and dichotomies and nuances. But we also, this idea that we come in a time where time itself has been questioned. The entire idea of how we figure time or picture time or imagine time or measure time. Well, all of that is obviously fascinating if you're a novelist, but also that there's a time before time which isn't time, which is unimagined, unimaginable, a dark, strange, mysterious, and that we go back into that dark. That we come out of dark and we go back into dark, and we have a small time on the earth. Well, that nourishes a novel. It would nourish a poet perhaps even more, but it would nourish anyone who works at making images, whether they're verbal images or whether you're working as a painter or as a sculptor or indeed with installations, that these concepts actually matter probably more than grammar. Or as much as grammar.
And this kind of unknowability with the beginning or ending of time, which especially cosmology addresses, was of special interest to you in this question?
Yes, I'm interested in unknowability as a concept in fiction, that of producing characters who seem immensely interesting, if I can get it right, but are oddly unknowable. They seem to glitter and shine, but are not stable. And you know, the whole history of fiction is meant to be, you're meant to see these people as though you know them. You know, in the 19th century novel with Madame Bovary or with Tolstoy, you're meant to see the characters and know them. But I think in the 20th century, after modernism, what we wanted to try and make were characters who were oddly unknowable. And
veiled in a way.
What?
Veiled, behind a veil maybe.
Yes, exactly. And but you still were following them somehow. And that this is maybe who we all have become. And so finding then that there was a correlative for this within nature. That there were so many aspects of what's in the very air that is unknowable, that no one has defined dark matter. People may be able to trace it, but as to what it is, and no one can even trace dark energy or define it. So these things are very, very interesting from our point of view, because they maybe increase our confidence that we should work more and more as novelists with ideas of unknowability in almost every area.
And even the thinking about these topics brings you forward, doesn't it?
Well, you see, the problem is if you don't think about them. The problem is if you don't think about the scientific things as a novelist, you end up knowing nothing. And you might as well be describing a tea party, you know, among animals, you know, that in other words, once you're trying to place humans in the world now, you really have to take this into account. And this doesn't mean you have to be able to do the mathematical equations, because those 3 or 4 years learning that, novelists, we spend really quite chaotically, you know, not doing that. But nonetheless, you do have to have that knowledge. Not of the precise mathematical equations, which is the job of the scientists, but of the general outline of knowledge, or indeed unknowability as it exists now.
And what do you think can particularly be the contribution of a writer to the core question of this project, or to the goal of this project?
Oh, I think to make a mess of it. I mean, it isn't as though I can come back to you with anything that will help a scientist with science. But at the same time, I can show you very easily, almost as a scientist could with an experiment, what I can do with this knowledge once I give it to a character and let a character start playing with it and play with it myself. I can do that almost in the same way as a scientist could do a simple experiment for you.
You show how it works, how it is born, more or less, how it is applied.
Well, I can show you how, if somebody that I imagine comes here and spends time here and talks to the scientists I have spoken to, what that person could eventually start thinking, or most important for a novel, start feeling. Because of course, well, I'm working, I'm working not merely with epistemology, with what's known, but I'm working with what's being felt, and so that's an area that I don't think we can measure mathematically, and then maybe the best way to find out about it is to read a novel.
Dealing with complex topics often means that's dealing with narratives. Narratives can help you understand the meaning of something, the complexity of it. What do you see as the most important narratives science offers us today?
It offers us a broken narrative, which is probably the most interesting narrative, where, I mean, I was partly trained as an historian. Now, if you apply any historical method, I mean, they break every rule, these scientists. For example, in historical study, you don't begin by saying the French Revolution took place in 1789, and we need to go back from that to find the causes of it.
Yeah.
Historians never do that anymore. They now do. In 1787, there was no the material that made the French Revolution was not in place. Something else could have occurred.
Yeah.
It was not known. So we have to look at that year without thinking about what happened 2 years later. But what here they're constantly saying to me, no, we go backwards from an event that we know occurred. We go backwards to find the probabilities that caused or may have or must have or might have caused this. So that of course is fascinating because it goes against something that I know, and that of course gives me energy. I get energy from watching somebody breaking up something that I already know and making it not true. But also, of course, for an historian, I need to know what happened before. I need to know, look, I know there was the 11th century, and I know the 11th century, you know, began in the year 1000. What happened in the year 950? And historians then will always, or indeed novelists will be able to tell you, you know, that character before, that in order for that character to be there, there had to be parents. Before that, there were other parents. And while you don't have to imagine them in full, you do have to be aware that this is happening among generations, in society, in time, in reality. But of course, this gets broken completely by scientists who tell you, don't ask. I mean, one of the people said, just stop asking me. Stop thinking like that. That's not a good way to think. I said, don't tell me what a good way to think is. I'll tell you what a good way to think is. I want to know what happened before the Big Bang. He said, there was no time. So don't think about time before that. And there were no structures that we could talk about with any, to make any sense. And of course, that is the idea of nothing. The idea of coming from nothing and going into nothing has its own beauty and has its own gorgeousness almost, and again goes against, I mean, goes against, because the novel is so firmly set in time, one sentence. I mean, okay, you have the beginning of a novel, but often the reader can easily imagine what happened before the beginning. It's not hard, and you're often given flashbacks to help you. But so, in other words, what's always interesting is finding concepts that go against your own, and that you have to listen to carefully, and that clash with your own. And out of that clash, you get a sort of energy.
And the last question, what can literature do for man?
Oh, it's probably the only, you see, if we don't have the story of ourselves, and if we can't imagine ourselves within a story, then there is a great loneliness attached to being alive. And so by connecting things in story, I mean, it's the first thing a child wants is, but what happened next?
Oh, what happened before?
Yes, why? Well, that child asking why, which in a way science can work with in various ways. But the novel, the story, what happened before, what happened after, and that moment where the sheer excitement, they're putting shape on experience. And I think that we do have a need to put shape on things, not all the time. I mean, obviously we can't go on every day doing that, because experience is essentially thin. But that having that available to us, a way of seeing an arc, a circle, a shape, a square, or just a line, actually makes sense of something for us that maybe gives us pleasure, but also has moral implications, teaches us to notice things more and to relish things more, and to live in a way which is more fully conscious or alive, to be more alive.
So it embeds you into other people's lives, experiences.
Yes, it embeds you in life itself. And in a way, when we're alive, perhaps there's nothing more interesting than life itself. Which is maybe why the scientists are so interesting, because they are talking about life itself, the thing. Whereas in religion, you're talking about, eternal life or a life that you cannot imagine. But actually being able to measure the speed of light, or to talk about galaxies and and speed, to be able to actually name things and gather information about things allows us to really relish or notice or be involved more with life.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Colm
very
Tóibín.
much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.